Hey everyone, so throughout this unit we've been talking about innovation, and really for the entire year we've been talking about a lot of times within history that, while important for ourselves today, are not as deeply rooted and connected as this next topic is, and that is the information age. And it's the time period in which we're living in. And so we'll go through how this time came to be and talk about the lessons for innovation that it presents. So what is the information age? It refers to the late 20th and early 21st century, which we're living in. And it's marked by a shift from traditional industry, so factories and things like that, talking about the Industrial Revolution, to economies based on information and digital technologies, where more people are working in fields that are either information based or related to computer science or digital technologies. Unlike previous eras that emphasized manufacturing and working with physical products or agriculture, this age values data, software, and connectivity. And so information becomes a key source of power within this time period, both economically, politically, and culturally. And it does mirror sort of some of the things that we talked about with the Industrial Revolution, but in a digital form. Um, Now, really, the key driver of this was the rapid innovation that has taken place over the last 80 years, 90 years in computing and communication, which has transformed how people access and use knowledge rapidly. So all of this comes down to the last 80 years, where after World War II, um, the foundations were sort of set. Military needs during the war led to innovation in computing. Things like ENIAC, which became one of the first electronic computers, were built in 1945. At first, they were done to sort of decode messages from enemies, and then it sort of grew in a way for you know our military to sort of communicate with each other. And so the Cold War continued to encourage sort of this rivalry that we have with the Soviet Union, further encourages investments in technology, including satellites, early networking between computers, advanced cryptography, all of which are leading to more government funding going into early computer systems and specifically into research into computing and communication systems. And so this is going to lay the groundwork for other companies to come along and attempt to build on these uses, including civilians, so people not working for the military. So between the 1940s and the 1970s, this research continues to build into some of the early computers. And these early computers were massive. They were the size of rooms. We see a picture of one of them here. And they were mostly used for extremely simple things, like calculations, like processing data. And they were specifically only used or found on government campuses or buildings and in university campuses. A few things start to change how good these early computers were. The first of these was the invention of the transistor in 1947. You also have integrated circuits in 1958. And these are making computers smaller, faster, more affordable because these boards are starting to become smaller and smaller. In the 1970s, companies like IBM start to introduce computers that could be sold for the first time to individuals. Uh, but it's mostly just for people that are wanting to experiment with computers themselves. So to this point, computers are really just for people that are really interested in computers, know a lot about them, and so it's not necessarily for the common person as of yet. However, that's going to change in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Companies like Apple start to come out and really revolutionize how accessible these computers are. As they become smaller and smaller, you can start to have them in people's homes, and this allows greater amounts of people to have, for the first time, access to a computer and to start to learn how to use them. Now, out of this digital age that is starting to be birthed, a lot of these companies are located not far away from Stanford University in Northern California. And so this starts to become the epicenter of where a lot of these digital technologies are taking place. And so, named after the type of material that is in a lot of these computers, silicon, Silicon Valley starts to become known as the birthplace of this digital age. And so companies like Intel, IBM, Apple, Microsoft, we're all sort of growing out of this time, and we're starting to make it so that more and more people could enjoy and be a part of this digital age by owning a personal computer. But you also have investors start to get involved in this. And even from the earliest times of innovation, like the Renaissance that we talked about, investors have been huge in terms of sort of fueling the growth of these industries and fueling the innovation that takes place in these times. Because these companies need money in order to afford the necessary products that they need to build. And so venture capitalists are looking for companies that show promise, in order to fund them. Some of them work out, some of them don't, but it is similar to sort of the patronage system. But the main goal here is often just solely in the making of more money and not necessarily in the terms of like making art or anything like that. But in all, because this was such a new field, this culture was really emphasizing a lot of experimentation to sort of further the innovation that was taking place. It emphasized collaboration to continue growing within this field, and also fast-paced development to continue getting these products out there as quickly as possible. So one thing that obviously is going to impact our lives monumentally is the internet. And the internet at this time is something that is only used in US military circles and, several major companies as well. It is not for the common person yet. But the internet began as something known as ARPANET in 1969. It was a U.S. military research project in order to link computers so that they can communicate and send data over long stretches of, time and space. So over time, academic institutions started to join the network to share information and research across these different schools. And in 1983, it sort of started to standardize, through the TCP IP protocol, started to standardize communication across these networks. And so this started to make the internet bigger and bigger and started to make it more possible for a modern internet to take place. So the invention in 1989 and 1990 of what was called the World Wide Web by a man named Tim Berners-Lee continued to allow more users to access and share these documents. And in the 1990s, we start to, from that, see an explosive growth in internet use in commercial ISPs, websites that are all becoming more widespread. And that's where you see like the growth of something like AOL that we have right in front of us. So by the mid 1990s, the internet is starting to move from elite institutions into mainstream society, where for the first time, common people are able to get online and to start to use web browsers like Netscape Navigator or Internet Explorer, things that we don't even have around to this day. But this is allowing users to explore the web for the first time. A lot slower than we have today because none of this was wireless. You had to be connected to a phone system in order to be able to use it. But now people are, looking for things like news or entertainment or, feeling like they can learn more from online. As well as for the first time, people selling goods over the internet starting to become exciting and important. And so the dot-com boom is starting to see massive investments in these companies where you can sell goods online, you can provide services online, and this is leading to a lot of early businesses being created. However, many of them end up collapsing in the early 2000s because in the first wave of this sort of innovation, not everyone is understanding how this business is going to work. However, some of these early companies are going to go on to change the world. And so several companies that become hugely important businesses like Amazon or eBay, more Amazon than eBay at this point, but these start to emerge during this time. You also have search engines and sort of a pathway to knowledge that end up existing. So early search engines like Ask Jeeves or Yahoo end up, being created first, and then later on you sort of see the birth of things like Google, which we're obviously much more, aware of, and whose algorithm for how we find that information sort of revolutionized how users access the information that would be online. And so this provided sort of a prioritization of the most relevant websites. And these search engines start to democratize the information access because people for the first time are able to online see and learn about anything instantly. So things like encyclopedias, libraries, other, sort of gatekeepers of knowledge that decided which information was important, what information was not, are now being, added to or completely replaced by online sources like Wikipedia, which is shifting the control of knowledge to the users who are then editing this information. But you also see in the early 2000s, not just a democratization of, the knowledge given, but also our connection to other people. And that comes through social media. So the early 2000s saw the rise of social media programs and platforms like MySpace or Facebook or YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, all of which, have made massive impacts on our lives. Not so much MySpace or Facebook, I'm guessing for most of you, but the other three for sure, because this is transforming how people communicate, how people collaborate or work together, how people shape their identities. Having an influencer just didn't exist even 20 years ago, and there are people that made millions upon millions, if not billions of dollars, becoming famous on platforms like YouTube. And on top of that, social media are becoming tools of influence. It's shaping elections, it's shaping advertisings, it's shaping public opinion, even for political movements like the Arab Spring, in which there were a lot of different revolutions within the Middle East and Northern Africa. These groups used platforms like Twitter and Facebook in order to organize protests and challenge authoritarian regimes. And all of these tools are sort of giving ordinary people new power, but it's also creating a bunch of new dangers like misinformation and data manipulation that's taking place today. Now, on top of it, another issue that we're seeing is sort of a digital divide. And this digital divide, refers to the fact that the benefits of the information age have not been evenly distributed to all people. And so this is the gap between people with access to digital technology and those who do not. So rural areas, low-income communities, developing nations oftentimes do not have the internet infrastructure in order to access the internet to the same degree as other places. And this can limit one's education, their economic opportunities, their civic participation, and efforts by governments to, close this divide through investments in technology access and digital literacy have been effective, but they have been again uneven in terms of how long they've been lasting. You also see creativity sort of change in this digital age as well. And the internet has enabled new forms of artistic and intellectual creativity, like I mentioned a couple slides ago. So if you're someone that goes onto YouTube or TikTok or Spotify, this does allow creators to publish content without needing to be a traditional gatekeeper. Like if I was writing a show 20 years ago, I would have had to have a television studio say yes to my idea and then allow me to go on there. If I just go onto YouTube, I can create a video as a complete unknown, and if I'm able to attract people to watch it, I grow in popularity. And so those gatekeepers are no longer there as much. And so this has transformed music and film and literature, as well as things like journalism as well. It's also allowed, movements for things like open source software, where you can sort of copy other people's software or coding capabilities and create things off of that. And, as well as creating digital art that can be sold and bought through things like NFTs. You also have information and power that changes in this information age as well. I've mentioned that information is the main currency of this age. And so this is really a form of power in the digital age. So companies like Google or Meta, which controls Facebook and Instagram, or Amazon, these places collect vast amounts of user data, and they then sell that to other companies that then have, give companies like Google or Amazon mass amounts of power over what we see, we buy, we believe. And all of this can have a massive impact on society. Governments also use these tools in order to surveil or use propaganda or use control to varying amounts depending on which country you are in. And this presents major questions and issues for the future. And these have become major political issues. And this all leads us into our first discussion question. So after I read it out, go ahead and pause and go ahead and answer on your sheets the discussion question. So the discussion question is, in what ways has the internet given ordinary people more power? And how has it increased the power of governments and corporations as well? So sort of looking at it from all angles here. Now, in terms of looking at the long-term effects of this age in which we live, a couple things. For one, things like remote work or virtual learning or telehealth, in which you can, do your healthcare appointments by internet or by video. This has expanded rapidly during global events like the COVID-19 pandemic. But you also have the growth of things like AI, machine learning, where you're learning off of the computer, big data that we talked about with, mass amounts of data being sold by companies like Google that are collected as you go different places on the internet. And then disinformation campaigns and, sort of content that is driven by how the algorithm sort of, looks at your personality and determines what you want to watch, or what it thinks you should watch. These can polarize societies. These can challenge democracy as, people are sort of restricted from seeing the things that, they may have not have free will or choice over. So all of these are important questions as we move forward on how to balance this innovation with the responsibility it takes to continue to uphold our democracy. And so all of this leads us to sort of a conclusion of looking at this new revolution, because we've talked about so many different revolutions throughout this course, but specifically in this unit about how things change within society. And this is just one more step in that process. The digital revolution mirrors the impact of these earlier transformative periods that we looked at, like the Renaissance, like the scientific revolution. In the same way that these other movements did, it challenges traditional power structures, it transforms communication, it redefines creativity, all of which we've seen with our own world here. And then the rapid spread of information has potential to both unite and divide, peoples and societies in some of the same way that we've seen with other times as well. And so all of this leads us into continuing to think about what our future looks like and what steps we need to take in order to sort of, both allow these technologies to grow, but also think about the potential ethical drawbacks of them. All right. If you have any questions, please let me know. And other than that, have a great day.